Queen Camilla entered the private council chamber, expecting another routine briefing. But the moment the sealed folder was placed before King Charles, the atmosphere changed. No one spoke. No one moved. Inside was a decree written under Queen Elizabeth's personal authority, one that did not merely praise Catherine's future role. It formally established that, in matters of dynastic continuity and royal representation, the Princess of Wales would stand above Camilla, and the Queen's face instantly froze. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles kept one hand beside the folder as the officer confirmed its authenticity before Camilla, William, and Catherine. A royal decree was a binding written command carrying the monarch's authority, while dynastic continuity meant protecting succession and the future crown. Elizabeth's order did not merely praise Catherine, it entered palace records and declared her the senior female royal whenever the heirs, family representation, or monarchy's long-term future were involved. Camilla leaned forward, as though the words had been mistranslated. She asked for the final paragraph again, gripping the table when nothing changed. The document preserved her position as queen beside the sovereign, giving her precedence at duties centered on his reign, yet it sharply limited that status. Catherine would stand above her in every matter tied to William, the royal children, and the crown that would follow. Catherine felt no victory. She remained still, troubled by the humiliation unfolding across the table, while William watched her hands tighten. He knew his wife had not requested this authority, but understood why his grandmother protected it. Charles saw the same pain and refused to meet Camilla's eyes, because one glance might reveal whether he was shocked, ashamed, or resigned. William then noticed Elizabeth's private cipher, the personal mark proving the order came directly from the late monarch. Attached was a legal certification and a handwritten instruction requiring the file to remain sealed until the household faced confusion between marriage and inheritance. A second page went further. Elizabeth had anticipated resistance and forbidden any consort, private secretary, or palace advisor from changing the decree after activation. Camilla pushed her chair backward. The scrape cut through the chamber. She stared at Charles and asked, "How long have you known this existed?" The king set down his pen but did not answer. Before he could speak, William saw a date in the lower corner, a date linking the decree to one specific incident between the two women. But the document had done more than rearrange precedents. It had exposed a private wound between four people who could no longer hide behind their titles. The decree was written in formal language, but its consequences were painfully human. For Camilla, it threatened the legitimacy she had spent decades trying to secure. For Catherine, it imposed authority she had never publicly demanded. For William, it confirmed that his grandmother had quietly protected his wife. And for Charles, it forced an impossible reckoning: defend the woman beside him, or uphold the final command of the mother whose crown he inherited. Camilla had spent years surviving public rejection, private suspicion, and the constant shadow of the past. Becoming queen, the title given to the reigning king's wife, had finally seemed to settle her place beside Charles. She believed the long battle was over. Yet Elizabeth's decree had reopened every doubt, because it suggested that acceptance had never become complete trust. Catherine carried a different burden. Her authority came from standing beside the direct heir and raising the next generation, placing her at the heart of the monarchy's future. She had never asked to outrank another woman. Now that power had been handed to her through Camilla's humiliation, and the victory felt more like a wound. Camilla removed her reading glasses once the chamber emptied. Alone with a trusted aide, she admitted through a documented private account that public criticism no longer frightened her. What she could not endure was the thought that Elizabeth had never trusted her with the dynasty. The queen consort's voice remained controlled, but her hands shook as she folded the decree's summary. Catherine found William in another room and spoke before he could reassure her. She told him she wanted no authority built on another woman's shame. The prince answered that rejecting the order would also reject his grandmother's deliberate protection. He then recalled a recorded conversation with Elizabeth, when she warned that the monarchy must distinguish between the companion of a king, and the guardian of the line. Only now did he understand. Charles knew rumors of a sealed instruction had existed, but he had never seen the final wording. Elizabeth had kept the original outside the sovereign's ordinary papers, meaning beyond the files normally controlled by the reigning monarch. Even her son could not quietly remove it. Charles entered Camilla's sitting room without aids. She stood beside a table covered with engagement papers and asked whether he truly believed Catherine should outrank her. The king paused too long, then said the decree left him no choice. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Is this loyalty to your mother?" Camilla asked, "or agreement with her?" William's discovery soon made the silence even heavier. The date on the decree led back to one tense ceremony at Windsor, where Elizabeth had watched private rivalry become a threat to royal continuity. To understand why the late queen drew such a brutal line, the family would have to return to the day Camilla made one request Catherine could never forget. Years before the decree was opened, a seemingly minor disagreement unfolded behind closed doors at Windsor Castle. There were no raised voices, no public scandal, and no dramatic departure. Yet Queen Elizabeth witnessed enough in that single encounter to begin drafting an order that would later stun the monarchy. The trigger was not a crown, a title, or a jewel. It was Camilla's demand to replace Catherine at a ceremony representing the future's heirs, and the reason she gave changed everything. Palace planners prepared the continuity of the crown, a ceremony designed to present the sovereign, the heir, his wife, and the succession line. The term meant a display of how royal duty passes between generations. Catherine received the central family role because the event concerned William, their children, and the future monarchy. Camilla would accompany Charles, but she would not lead that part. Camilla challenged the arrangement during a closed meeting with Elizabeth. She asked the monarch to remove Catherine from the central presentation and place the future queen consort beside Charles instead. Her argument sounded measured, but its meaning was sharp. Allowing the younger woman to lead, she said, would weaken the dignity of the sovereign's spouse. Catherine entered before the discussion ended. She stopped when she heard her name and understood that Camilla did not see her role as service. She saw it as a threat. The queen consort designate tried to soften the demand by calling it protocol, meaning the rules governing royal rank and ceremony. Catherine answered quietly that the event concerned the heirs, not personal recognition, then left before her control broke. Elizabeth said almost nothing. She watched one woman defend present status while the other defended future duty, and the difference settled in her mind. That evening, the monarch summoned her constitutional advisor, the official who guided her on royal authority, and dictated the decree's first line. The crown must never confuse proximity to the sovereign with responsibility for its continuation. William found Catherine alone near St. George's Hall, pressing her fingers against the windowsill and fighting tears. When the prince asked what had happened, she whispered, "I was made to feel as though our future was an intrusion." He stayed until she could speak without trembling. Elizabeth visited Catherine later and made no direct accusation against Camilla. Instead, she said, "Your place will one day require protection from those who mistake visibility for permanence." Now the open decree proved she had never forgotten Windsor. Camilla knew it too, and she could see that Catherine remembered every word. When the two women were finally left face to face, the old Windsor wound stopped being history and became an accusation neither could escape. The palace expected lawyers, advisors, and secretaries to manage the consequences. Instead, Catherine asked for the room to be cleared. For the first time since Elizabeth's decree became official, she and Camilla stood alone, without Charles, without William, and without the protection of ceremony. What followed was not a battle over titles. It was a reckoning over Windsor, loyalty, and the painful suspicion that one woman's security had always depended on keeping the other beneath her. Catherine chose a small reception room because she refused to let a constitutional document become a permanent wall between them. A constitutional document was a formal order defining how royal authority operated. Camilla entered believing the princess had summoned her to claim victory, yet there were no aids, files, or ceremonial distance to hide behind. Camilla spoke first. She accused Catherine of accepting a position designed to humiliate the king's wife, and asked whether she had known about Elizabeth's plan. The queen's voice remained controlled, but each word carried years of fear. Catherine answered that she knew nothing. Then she paused and asked, "Did you truly ask her to place me behind you at a ceremony for my own children's future?" Camilla turned toward the closed door, and placed one hand on the handle without opening it. Her silence answered first. She admitted making the Windsor request, explaining in that private conversation that fear, not hatred, had driven her. Once Catherine became the admired face of the monarchy's future, she believed there would be no meaningful place left for the woman Charles had fought to marry. Catherine did not soften. She revealed in the same exchange that Elizabeth had warned her never to compete with Camilla, because time would determine their roles. The late monarch had been managing both women, protecting one from insecurity and the other from obstruction. That truth made the room feel smaller. Camilla's anger broke into sadness. She confessed that every royal room still felt filled with people remembering Diana, measuring her against a woman she could never replace. Catherine did not dismiss the pain. She said fear could explain the request, but it could not justify blocking the succession, the lawful line through which the crown passes to the next monarch. Camilla faced her and asked whether she now considered herself the senior royal woman. Catherine held her gaze. "I see myself as responsible for what comes next." "That is not the same thing." The door opened. An aide announced that Charles had called an emergency household meeting to decide how Elizabeth's decree would be enforced. The private confrontation had exposed the fear behind the rivalry. But beyond that door, the palace was preparing to turn Elizabeth's words into irreversible power. King Charles sat at the head of the table, yet for the first time since ascending the throne, he was not the most powerful presence in the room. Elizabeth's decree lay open before him, protected by signatures, sealed instructions, and language designed to survive his objections. He could interpret its ceremonies, but he could not erase its meaning. Every advisor knew it. William knew it. And Camilla knew that her husband's crown could not rescue her from his mother's final command. Charles listened as advisors divided the royal household into two clear spheres. Catherine would lead events involving succession, the preparation of future heirs, dynastic charities, and ceremonies linking the present reign to William's future kingship. Succession meant the lawful passage of the crown, while dynastic duties were responsibilities tied to protecting the ruling family's next generation. Camilla would remain queen and retain precedence beside the king at occasions centered only on his reign. Charles rubbed the edge of his signet ring, the engraved royal ring used to mark personal authority, and kept glancing toward Camilla's empty chair. She had refused to attend. Her absence made the decision feel less like policy and more like judgment. William demanded exact enforcement. The prince warned that selective obedience would turn Elizabeth's command into a hollow symbol and leave the same rivalry alive beneath softer language. Charles struck back, accusing his son of treating Camilla like a constitutional inconvenience instead of a wounded human being. The future king did not retreat. He answered that his grandmother had written the decree because personal loyalty had already distorted royal duty. The royal archivist then played a recorded memorandum in Elizabeth's voice. A memorandum was an official statement preserved as evidence of intention. The late monarch declared that a consort's rank must never overtake the woman guiding the direct heir and raising the next generation. Then came the deeper blow. William was named protector of the decree. If any future sovereign weakened it, he was ordered to defend Catherine publicly. Charles reached for the implementation order and held his pen above the signature line. Silence tightened around him. Then the king asked everyone except William to leave. Charles admitted the painful truth once the door closed. Signing would deeply wound his marriage. William replied that refusing would wound the crown and publicly reject Elizabeth's final judgment. For several seconds, father and son said nothing. Charles signed. Within hours, Camilla's office received a revised calendar. 3 major engagements had been removed from her control and transferred directly to Catherine. The signature took only seconds, but when the revised schedule reached Camilla, The decree stopped being history and became her new daily reality. Camilla had survived scandal, hostility, and years of being told she would never be accepted. Yet none of those battles prepared her for the quiet cruelty of a revised palace schedule. There was no accusation written across the page, no public dismissal. Just 3 engagements crossed from her office and reassigned to Catherine under the authority of Elizabeth's decree. One of them was the ceremony Camilla had already begun preparing, and her reaction revealed how deeply the decision had cut. Camilla sat alone at her desk and read the schedule twice. The first practical loss was the Heirs Foundation reception, an annual gathering supporting youth charities, constitutional education, and groups connected to the monarchy's future. She had approved the speech, selected the guests, and expected to host beside Charles. Now Catherine was named lead royal. William would accompany her, and the Queen could attend only through the King's invitation. Camilla circled Catherine's name, placed the page flat, and asked her secretary to cancel the fitting without explanation. The silence carried more pain than anger. When Charles entered, she did not stand. She simply asked whether he had personally signed the transfer. Charles admitted that he had. The king said Elizabeth's decree left no lawful path around the change, because its authority had already been formally activated. Camilla looked at him and answered that he still controlled the speed, the announcement, and the manner of enforcement. Her husband had not written the judgment, but he had chosen how quickly it reached her door. Camilla's secretary then disclosed through a documented scheduling memorandum that the changes went far beyond 3 engagements. Correspondence involving George, Charlotte, and Louis would now pass through Catherine's office before reaching the sovereign's household. That office meant the staff and advisors managing the monarch's official work. The Queen would also lose her assumed right to lead senior women's planning meetings whenever they concerned the future reign. Camilla opened a red dispatch box and removed the speech she had prepared. A dispatch box was the locked case used for official royal papers. She tore the first page in half, then stopped. Instead of destroying the rest, she folded the pages carefully and returned them. Grief had taken control where rage had failed. Catherine received the transferred papers and felt no triumph. She told her staff not to celebrate, because authority gained through another woman's public diminishment had to be exercised with restraint. That evening, she sent Camilla a handwritten request for a private meeting, not as the woman who now outranked her, but as one woman asking another to decide what happened next. The palace expected Camilla to reject the invitation, yet the meeting she accepted would alter the meaning of Elizabeth's decree for them both. There were no private secretaries waiting outside, no constitutional advisors taking notes, and no husbands positioned between them. Catherine chose a small morning room and asked that even the tea be left at the door. When Camilla entered, neither woman used the other's title. The decree still stood. The hierarchy had not changed. But for the first time, they spoke not as rival royal figures trapped beneath Elizabeth's judgment, but as 2 women forced to decide whether rank would define their relationship. Catherine spoke first. She said the decree could clarify responsibility, but it could not command compassion, and she would not allow the new structure to become a campaign of exclusion. Camilla had arrived expecting polished words designed to make the princess appear gracious. Instead, she found no aids, no documents, and no prepared statement. A royal hierarchy was simply the order of rank inside the family, yet both women understood that rank alone could not repair what Windsor had broken. Catherine admitted that the request had wounded her. She had not wanted ceremonial prominence. What hurt was the suggestion that her duty to William and their children could be dismissed as ambition. Camilla listened without interrupting, then apologized without qualification. She confessed in that private conversation that fear had ruled her judgment. Catherine's natural acceptance, she said, exposed how conditional her own place still felt, even after marriage, service, and the crown. Camilla then heard the boundary she had feared. Catherine would not soften Elizabeth's decree, especially where the heirs and the future reign were concerned. Yet the princess offered something different, a defined sphere honoring Camilla's work in literacy, domestic abuse support, elder care, and causes tied directly to Charles's reign. Those duties would preserve service without forcing her to compete with the succession, the lawful line through which the crown passes. Camilla revealed that she had considered withdrawing from major public duties. Catherine answered that retreat would make Elizabeth's order appear punitive when its purpose was to prevent confusion, not erase years of work. Camilla reached into her handbag and removed the original invitation to the Heirs Foundation reception. She slid it across the table. "This belongs to you now." Catherine pushed it back. She asked her to attend, not as leader, but as family. Camilla's voice changed. She asked whether Windsor could truly be separated from what came next. Catherine replied that forgiveness would take time, but cooperation could begin immediately. They agreed on a joint statement defining their separate roles. Before that statement could be released, the decree leaked publicly. Their fragile understanding had survived the private room, but outside the palace walls, Elizabeth's hidden judgment was about to become everyone's argument. By sunrise, the secret belonged to the nation. The wording of Elizabeth's decree appeared across television screens, newspaper pages, and phones around the world. Commentators called it a constitutional safeguard. Critics called it a final rebuke. Supporters of Catherine celebrated the future queen's authority, while defenders of Camilla saw a woman publicly diminished by someone no longer alive. But one image outside Buckingham Palace captured the mood more powerfully than any headline, and forced the family to choose how they would face the country. The leak exposed the decree's sharp distinction. Camilla remained queen beside Charles, but Catherine held senior dynastic authority whenever the heirs or monarchy's future were involved. Dynastic authority meant responsibility tied to protecting the ruling family's next generation. Palace communications staff drafted separate statements for the king, his wife, William, and Catherine. Yet the competing versions made the family appear divided before anyone had spoken publicly. Crowds gathered at Buckingham Palace as copies of the London Chronicle rose above the gates. Its front page carried split portraits of Camilla and Catherine beneath one brutal headline: "The Queen of Today, the woman chosen for tomorrow." That evening, a national broadcaster opened with Elizabeth signing a document, followed by Catherine greeting children at a charity event. The presenter described the decree as the late monarch's attempt to protect succession, the lawful passage of the crown, from personal rivalry. Camilla watched from Clarence House until a commentator called her ceremonially elevated but dynastically secondary. She switched off the television and sat in silence, wounded by how quickly private pain had become public language. Across London, Catherine heard crowds chanting her name outside Kensington Palace. She told William that celebration felt cruel when it rested on another woman's humiliation. The prince reminded her that refusing responsibility would not heal Camilla, but he could see the praise unsettling his wife. Charles rejected all four statements. The king ordered one family appearance at the Heirs Foundation reception, forcing Camilla to attend the event, transferred from her control. His decision offered unity, but it also placed both women before the country at the moment of greatest tension. Catherine paused at the entrance instead of walking ahead. She extended her hand toward Camilla and waited. The queen hesitated, then accepted it. They entered side by side before the princess moved into the official leading position. The crowd's noise shifted into applause, not because rank had vanished, but because neither woman chose to weaponize it. Inside, Charles prepared to speak. Every face turned toward him as the room tightened. The country had seen who outranked whom. Now the king had to explain whether the decree represented rejection, protection, or the painful boundary between them. The room fell silent when King Charles stepped forward. Camilla stood to one side, Catherine to the other, and William remained close enough to support them both. The decree had already spoken in the language of rank, but the king now had to speak in the language of family. He could not undo Elizabeth's decision. He could not erase Camilla's pain or Catherine's burden. What he could do was finally define what the moment meant, and end the struggle his silence had allowed. Charles confirmed publicly that the decree was authentic and binding. Binding meant it carried authority that could not be ignored or quietly changed. Catherine would hold precedence in all matters involving succession, the future crown, the upbringing of the heirs, and preparation for William's eventual reign. Camilla would remain queen beside the sovereign, his senior companion in service, and the leading royal woman at duties centered on the present reign. Charles turned toward Camilla first. The king admitted that the decision had caused pain no title could hide. Then he faced Catherine, and acknowledged that the monarchy's future should never have been left exposed to private rivalry or uncertain custom. William watched his father speak, and understood that the silence protecting everyone had finally ended. Camilla did not challenge the decree. She stepped closer to Catherine, and said quietly, though clearly enough for the front row to hear, "Your duty is clear. I will not stand in its way again." Catherine answered that Camilla's years of service would not be erased, or treated as meaningless. They were not pretending to be close friends. They were choosing respect, clear boundaries, and an end to open competition. William finally understood Elizabeth's purpose. His grandmother had not selected a favorite. Through her recorded instruction, she had separated two kinds of royal legitimacy before fear could damage the succession. The lawful path by which the crown passes forward. Catherine began leading the foundation reception without triumph. She ensured Camilla's literacy initiative remained central, proving that seniority did not require cruelty. The Queen accepted that marriage to Charles had never placed her above the future crown. Her dignity returned when she stopped fighting for a role Elizabeth had never intended her to hold. Charles offered Camilla his arm as they left. She accepted it. Their marriage survived, but under a truth neither could escape. Devotion could not alter inheritance. Kate officially outranked Camilla wherever the monarchy's future was concerned. Camilla remained queen of the present reign, while Catherine stood confirmed as the senior woman of the next. And as Catherine led the future forward while Camilla stepped securely into the role that was truly hers, Elizabeth's final command achieved its purpose. Not revenge, not humiliation, but order. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.